What's up YouTube? Jeff back again from DopeTechDaily.com. Today I'm super excited. I'm bringing you my top 5 Android flagship phones for the first half of 2018. Now a few quick rules before we get started. The phone has to have been released in 2018 to be considered for this video. That means phones from 2017 like the Pixel 2, Pixel 2 XL, the Galaxy Note 8, those sort of phones do not qualify and they were not ranked on the list. So I'm not saying that those phones compare one to another for anything on this countdown. Also, I chose 5 criteria to rank by, so those are things I'll be showing you when we get started here. Hardware, software, camera, battery life, and additional features. Those are bonus features that don't fall into the other categories. So let's get started with my number 5 Android phone of the first half of 2017. That is the LG G7 ThinQ. So for each of the phones, I'm going to show you a scorecard, which is in Google Keep, that I put the numbers for the rankings on each of these phones. The LG G7 hardware an 8, so I'll talk a little bit about why it received an 8. The overall design here is a little bit boring in my opinion, that's why I knocked it down a few points. It's got an all glass slab, very similar to other phones that we've seen with the notch, etc. It does have some nice hardware features, of course. It has the top end specs, so it ticks all the boxes there. The design just really hasn't evolved too much, and LG didn't really put much thought into the overall hardware design, but you do get all of the latest internal hardware specs. Software. Now, I've talked many times about this. I'm not a huge fan of LG's UI, and it hasn't really changed much over the last couple years. They really need to iterate a little bit better to bring some more fresh look to their software. They could even consider going closer to stock Android or what Google's doing with the Pixel experience. The settings menu, the UI, everything's just a little bit bloated, a little bit crowded, and doesn't look very 2018 in my opinion. The software also lags a little bit with UI lag and input lag and things like that. So there's a couple reasons to knock some points down in the software category. Camera quality. So this phone does have a dual camera, of course. It's got the wide angle, which of course is a bonus. Not any other phone has that, and I did give them points in the bonus category for that. The wide angle shot, which is better than any other wide angle phone, that camera that I have seen on a phone, is overall very good, and for that reason I bumped the camera up to an 8. The main shooter on automatic mode isn't the best around. Of course you have manual mode, and if you can dial into that, the camera can be very good. But I generally rate the camera on the primary shooter using automatic, which is most consumers are going to do, and it's good, but it's not up there with the elite cameras, which you guys will see in the top 3. Battery life. This is the place where the LG G7 unfortunately has the worst ranking. It has a 6 out of 10. That's because I only get about 3.5 to 4 hours screen on time with this device. That's very below average, unfortunately. And also I've noticed that LG phones over time tend to degrade in battery life, which I assume this guy's going to get worse over time, which means it's going to be really bad later in its life cycle. And the final thing, the bonus features, which I give it a 10 out of 10 because this thing does have wireless charging. It does have dust-proof water resistance as well. It also has the quad DAC for audio. It's got a headphone jack, which actually is a bonus feature these days, and the aforementioned wide-angle camera, which is something that we don't see on many other phones. Overall, the LG G7 got a 7.9, and that brings it in at number 5 on my top 5 list. The next phone in my top 5 is the Htc U12 Plus. Now the Htc U12 Plus, let's go ahead and bring up its scorecard. Hardware, I gave it a 9 out of 10. The hardware is overall very good on this device. The design is fresh. You got the translucent blue here on the back. I really love the liquid metal color. HTC opted not to go with the notch trend, which I actually like, and that probably earned them an extra point in the hardware design category. Of course, you have all the latest specs with the Snapdragon 845, 6 gigs of RAM, plenty of storage, so it ticks all the boxes there in terms of hardware. Software, very similar situation with HTC that I just mentioned here with LG, and that is that the HTC U12 Plus does have a few issues when it comes to software. Sense hasn't really evolved much over time. There's a lot of bloatware built into the software, including in blink feed, things like ads, etc., which are difficult to disable. Also, some of the issues in the software with the Edge Touch along the side with Edge Sense seems to need some updates in order to get those things worked out. So the software could really use some work, just like on the G7. Camera, the camera on the HTC U12 Plus is excellent, so very impressed. Another phone with a dual camera. The zoom on the secondary camera, it's pretty standard. The portrait mode's very good. Daylight shots, low light shots, very good overall. This is definitely one of the top cameras of 2018 for Android so far. Battery life, 7 out of 10 on the battery life. I get about 4.5, maybe 5 hours screen on time on occasion on the HTC U12 Plus, which is probably average, but not the greatest in the world, and it's not going to compare to the elite phones in this countdown. Bonus features, you do have a couple things, again, like EdgeSense, you can squeeze to get some things to happen. They also have the new digital buttons, which don't have physical click to them. A lot of people didn't like those, but they are a feature, and they're something that I think might end up being adopted by other manufacturers over time. We'll just have to see how that works out, but I do think that it's some features that add some value. Overall, the HTC U12 Plus does have an 8 out of 10 for this particular video. Coming in at number 3 on my top 5 phones of 2018 is the OnePlus 6. Now the OnePlus 6, let's take a look at the scorecard for this phone. It does have a 9 for hardware, 9 out of 10. The only reason I bumped it down a notch, to be honest, it has all of the great upper tier specs, Snapdragon 845. The design, very similar to the LG G7, is just a little boring. There's nothing really innovative going on here with the design or the look of the hardware. The notch, of course, which is fine. I'm not detracting points really for the notch here, but it doesn't really have an innovative design. But the hardware otherwise is fantastic. Software, 10 out of 10. What can I say about Oxygen OS? It is the smoothest version of Android out there aside from stock Android. I love Oxygen OS. I don't really even need to put a third-party launcher on my phone when I have a OnePlus device because I like it that much. You've got custom themes now in the Android P beta, which is beautiful. You can color your icons any way you want. It's just overall a great experience on the software side. The next thing, camera. So this is one place where I don't love the OnePlus 6, and I've talked about this in my OnePlus 6 videos. You guys can all disagree with me, but from the photos I've taken out of this dual lens camera, I haven't seen anything that's too amazing in low light. I see good photos in good lighting, which I expect from a flagship camera, but it doesn't really compete with the upper tier photos out there. Also, the portrait mode's a little soft compared to some of the others out there, and for that reason, I gave it a 7 out of 10 on the camera front. Battery life, an 8 out of 10. So this guy gets about 5 to 5.5 hours screen on time. Pretty good, a little bit above average, but not elite like some of the other phones I'm going to talk about here in just a second. And then the final category, bonus features, I gave an 8 out of 10 to the OnePlus 6. I do love the alert slider, which you won't see on many Android phones these days. Also, another really good bonus feature, which I think counts for a lot, is the ability to run the Android P beta. None of the other phones in my top 5 today actually have the Android P beta available for their devices, aside from the OnePlus 6. All right, now we're on to the top 2. The second place phone in my 2018 countdown is the Huawei P20 Pro. So the Huawei P20 Pro, of course, a phone that's not available in the US, but I did import it, and I've been using this phone a lot, and I really like it. So let me tell you a few things about the Huawei P20 Pro. The first thing is the hardware. 9 out of 10 on the hardware. The main reason I didn't give this a 10 out of 10 is I love the design of the phone, and overall the specs are good, but the Kirin processor is just a little bit slower in terms of overall benchmarks, gaming, performance, things like that, when compared to the Snapdragon processor, and because it does have that Kirin chipset, I knocked off 1 point. Software, 6 out of 10 on the software. I've talked about this at length in my P20 Pro and my Huawei videos in the past. I'm just not a huge fan of EMUI still. It's not my favorite operating system. There's some weird choices made with battery optimization, also with notifications being received, things like that that just make it difficult to deal with, especially the notifications on the lock screen. As you guys can see, I put Action Launcher on here because I just don't like the stock UI either. I really like the swipe up to get to my app drawer, which Huawei doesn't offer by default. So the software, not the greatest, but you know, that's not a huge deal breaker for everyone. And here's the big thing about the Huawei P20 Pro that put it in second place: the camera and the battery life. The camera on this device is insane. Triple camera, the only real Android flagship that has that triple camera. Perhaps more importantly is this night mode that's built into the software. It gives you some amazing shots in practically dark conditions, which I really love. The P20 Pro's camera, in my opinion, is unrivaled. It's even better than the Pixel 2 XL, which I absolutely love as well from last year, but it's the best smartphone camera out there. And then battery life. I also have to rank it up there with my top Android phones in terms of battery life. Huge battery in this phone. It is a little bit thick, but you know, not a huge deal. I'll take that for the extra battery life. I get about 6.5 hours to 7 hours screen on time, which is right up there with the BlackBerry Key 2 as being the most battery life that I get out of any of my Android devices. And then the final thing, bonus features, 9 out of 10. One of my favorite features on the Huawei phones, which I've mentioned, is the private space feature, which lets you basically have 2 accounts. You can use a different fingerprint here to log into the other account, and then all you got to do is put in your passcode. It basically logs you into a completely separate account, which is beautiful, very nice to use. I know Samsung had some similar features, but nothing exactly like this over time, which basically gives you 2 users, one of them which is private. So that's a great feature, and I really like that and bumped up some points for their bonus features on that. And then the final thing is the score, 8.9 out of 10 for the Huawei P20 Pro. A very solid phone, which does work on T-Mobile and AT&T. So if you're in the US and you really want one, I would recommend giving it a look, maybe importing it. And the number one phone, I could probably guess at this point, it is the Galaxy S9 Plus. So maybe no surprise here, but the Galaxy S9 Plus is a beast of a device. Hardware, I gave it a 10 out of 10 because not only does it have all of the top tier specs, processor, RAM, everything else, storage, sufficient amount of storage, it has still a beautiful design. Didn't need to employ the notch in order to get what I consider to be the best full screen implementation still. The curved sides are a little bit of downside for some people, but at this point I've really gotten used to them. The phone feels amazing to use in hand, and for that reason I gave it a 10 out of 10 for design and also for its internal hardware specs. Software, 8 out of 10. Samsung Experience UI has evolved over time. It's still not my favorite because it's not the smoothest UI. You can see I am using the Pixel launcher, but Samsung does have a lot of customizable themes that you can do now. I'm running Good Lock 2018 and also theme out your settings. They have one of the richer third-party theming engines that you can actually install on a device. And for that reason, along with the fact that Samsung has cleaned up some of the bloat and lag on their devices, I did give them an 8 out of 10 on software. The camera, I gave it an 8 out of 10. An 8 out of 10 mainly because the primary camera does not quite compete with the Pixel 2 XL Huawei P20 Pro in low light. In good lighting, it's still a huge win. Shoots great photos. The dual camera also is good, but it doesn't have the same sort of kick as something like the LG G7 does with that ultra wide angle lens. So while it takes all around good photos, I don't place this in the top elite class of Android cameras. Battery life, 9 out of 10. I do get about 6 hours screen on time with the Galaxy S9 Plus, and it's been one of my primary devices for a while, so I'd say I've had a good read on it. Battery life hasn't really decreased over time either, so I would say that going forward, I'm looking forward to probably getting that same or around that for about a year of use. And then bonus features. Samsung throws everything in this phone. You have wireless charging, you have dust and water resistance, of course. You do have a headphone jack. You have Animoji if you really care about Animoji. I don't. You have a ton of accessories in their ecosystem, including the Dex Pad, where you can use your phone as a computer, basically, if you really want to. Samsung really gives you the option to do pretty much anything you want with your device. So the overall score, of course, for the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus is a 9 out of 10. And that's a very good score, of course. None of them scored higher than 9. That was the highest overall score. But I do think that this is a good choice for my first number one phone for 2018. So this is the first half, obviously. I will do the second half sometime in December. So if you guys are interested in that, just stay tuned. And of course, I will get that video out maybe around December 28th, 29th, something like that, right before the new year. Hope you guys will subscribe, like, comment below if you enjoyed the video. Find me at dopetechdaily.com, Google+, Instagram, and Twitter. The link's in the description. I appreciate you guys checking it out, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot for watching.